Two, one. Ladies and gentlemen, we're live. Not only 2 minutes late this week. That's mostly my fault. Mostly, John here
We're all
was.
good. I contributed to that.
Everybody, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Den of Lore. I do not have a motivational speech this week, although I did want to make somewhat of an announcement. I'm going to be moving, and I'm in the process of renovating the house. So, in the next couple of weeks, possibly the next month or so, I'll be doing the show from my laptop, as the new studio that I just built is going to be disassembled within the next couple of days. So there may be a slightly different background, environ, if you will. But I'm going to do my best, and we're just going to keep rolling. I just may be doing it from my laptop from my kitchen table. So, here you go. But on today's program, welcoming back to the show, and almost actually a year, or not a year. The last time we had you on was episode, was it 119? It was like 4 or 5 years ago, basically,
Yeah, it
to
was
the
2
day.
years.
Yeah. And welcoming John Cadman back onto the show. And so, John, as is tradition, I will be giving you your intro, as written by ChatGPT. Hopefully, it's a little more accurate this time. Introducing our guest on today's show, John Cadman, good longtime friend of the show. John is an engineer and inventor who has dedicated his career to unlocking the mysteries of the Great Pyramid of Giza. His groundbreaking work has led to a deeper understanding of the pyramid's inner workings and how it was constructed. John's research focuses on the subterranean section of the Great Pyramid, which he believes is the key to unlocking its secrets. He has built the first and only working model of this section, which demonstrates that there was a water machine under the pyramid that produced the sonic force to drive it. John's work builds upon the visions of other great minds, including Edward, I'm going to butcher his name, Kunkel?
That's it.
Kunkel, Chris
Oh,
Dunn, Stephen Mehler, who's also been on the show in ages past, and Joe Parr, whom I do not believe I've had the opportunity to meet.
he's passed since.
Oh, well, man. Well, that's unfortunate, but still.
You're too late.
Oh, we're not done yet. His model integrates these different perspectives into a cohesive whole, showing how they all fit together to form a complete picture of the pyramid's construction and function. Through his research, John has raised many questions as he has answered. But one thing is clear. His work has pushed the boundaries of what we know about the Great Pyramid and opened up new avenues for exploration and discovery. Join us today as we delve into John's fascinating research and learn more about the mysteries of the Great Pyramid. John, welcome back into the Den of Lore. For your honor, did I lose it? Oh. I cracked open my bottle of Macallan 12, so cheers to you, sir.
He's got a dram glass.
A white glass?
A dram.
It's a dram.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
I have a bottle of scotch. Oh. But I'm the brother Mike that helps where I can. And I have a nice dram glass like you have.
Well, thank you very much. That's always good to hear. How have you been? You weren't on the last two times, but I have been following.
Okay. He was in the background.
I do the
It was the
background.
camera and
I
stuff.
do the camera. I do the sound. I do all the stuff, the lighting changes and things in the background. So I'm the man behind the camera.
You can always just say, I'm the good-looking one.
Yes.
Well, gentlemen, I got to say,
I'll let you back to John.
Well, you can both be on. It's totally up to you. This is like a way more relaxed show than.
This is chill zone right now. We're fine. We're happy.
And
Okay.
for everyone out there, I did make sure, because I know the last time you were on, and it was amazing because you just gotten it working, but for like 2 hours, just thump, 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 thump. So I'm like, can we talk about the machine, but maybe not have the machine running? So, but it is amazing that it is running and has been running all these years. And I know that the, perspective, the attention has shifted more towards wow, this actually works from that's never going to work or you're wrong about that. And it's awesome to see because basically I've been watching it being built in pseudo real time along with anybody else who follows your Facebook page, and it's uh, from one computer guy and tinkerer to another, like that's just absolutely amazing. So
Hands on.
first off, and the fact that you rope your brother into it as well, and he's like, "We're gonna build some stuff," and he's like, "I got to make sure you don't die." So okay, I guess it's fine. So
There's a lot of truth to that.
well,
That's funny. There's a lot of truth to that. Just gotta make sure you don't die.
My brother John's roped me into a lot of things over since we've been very little, and it's done from like electronics to motocross to you name it. We've been sort of roped into these things.
I tried to get him to the Bering Sea and I failed.
No, I chose the military instead. I'd rather be shot at than going out on the Bering Sea where it's just miserable.
yeah, well, you guys were crabbers before. I know John John was.
I was.
So like, are we talking like Deadliest Catch style crabber?
Yes. Yeah. In
Wow.
fact, the boat I was chief on was on the first season. But I was on before Deadliest Catch was there, and it was all with all the camera crews and cameras. And so the skippers were way meaner. Because they could get away with it. They're serious. And the Norwegian ones are they're the worst.
Well,
As far as mean.
well, if you're captain of a ship, you're basically responsible for everyone's lives on there, and the Bering Sea isn't exactly the most hospitable environment for sailing, let alone anything else.
Listen, I noticed that. I did notice that.
I chose not to.
Well,
I chose special forces instead. I was good with that.
I'm sitting here like I'm just like a graphic designer guy. Like, it's like,
That's
oh,
all
man.
good.
Yeah.
Appreciated.
Well, so like, okay, for anybody who may be new to the show, and I know a lot of people are like, "Wow, Chris, you're back." I'm like, "Yes," and they're like, "Well, your old episodes are down." I'm like, "Yes," because we're starting fresh. So, like, help me out here, or help us all out here, and jogs people's memory, or at least introduce people to John Cadman and how you got into this whole subterranean chamber water
Absolutely.
pump building thing.
Absolutely. Now the subterranean, here's kind of how it all came to be. It was back in 1999. There was there was all the doomsday Y2K stuff that was out, and I was bored and trolling through some alternate history books, and I came across this one doomsday book by Richard Dunn. It's called 5/5/2000, and it was actually a really good book. It's just he had thrown that 5/5/2000 blip in it for sales, but it had to do mainly with the Templars and ancient history and things like the Great Pyramid. A lot on the Great Pyramid and the pyramids, and covered a lot like Peter Tompkins books about the Great Pyramid and secrets of the Great Pyramid. But in his book, in Richard Nune's book, he had a small section on an author named Edward Kunkel. And Edward Kunkel was a hydraulic engineer back in the Depression era, so in the 20s and 30s. But he had placed a bet about whether he could figure out how the Great Pyramid was built. And Edward Kunkel had surmised that they'd used water locks to basically float the blocks up a causeway to place them in where they needed to be. So he had the original water lock theory, and then he kind of reverse engineered part of this subterranean chamber, and then the whole upper pyramid assembly. And some of what he said made sense, and some of it was, you could tell he's wrong. And he never made a model that actually ran. But the book was called The Pharaoh's Pump. Edward Kunkel did the best he could for the resources he had. He didn't have internet and things like that. It was harder to do research. So Edward Kunkel had described two different pumps. He described one that he just kind of glossed over, which basically just took in the subterranean chamber, which is 100 feet below the base of the Great Pyramid itself, into the bedrock. And he had called it the construction pump. So that's what Edward Kunkel called it. And he had a lot of missing parts, and he just kind of guessed about it. And he really glossed over it in just a few sentences about this construction pump, which was basically a modified hydraulic ram pump. And hydraulic ram pumps have been around forever, like 1700s. They were invented in France. Very simple water pump that uses part of the flowing water and stopping instantaneously to create shock waves and high pressure spikes, and salvaging the high pressure spikes through check valves. Real basic, simple machine. Those have been around for ages, and they were used in the American Midwest at the farms and in the 1800s and into the 1900s. Pretty common before electricity. And in 1999, I moved up to some property which had no electricity. It had a pond that was uphill, but it was probably about 600 feet away from where water needed to be on gardening and stuff. And so you need to move water. So necessity is the mother of all invention. And so I saw this pump. It seemed like a very high efficiency hydraulic ram pump, utilizing some sort of vortex to boost the pumping ability. That was Kunkel's theory. And back in June of 1999, I made what he described as the construction pump, as opposed to the upper pyramid assembly, and it didn't work. I put like months into it, months into this model, and I was claiming to all the friends and family, "Oh, this is the best thing. This will be the best thing ever." And yeah, it was kind of a laughing stock for a while. But I did know Kunkel had a bunch right. And so between June of 1999 and December 31st of 1999, the very last day of the millennium, I did a bunch of research, and it actually came to me, the solution, in December 31st, 1999, evening, of all things, last hours of the millennium. And I sketched out and changed a bunch of different lines around so it matched the topography of the Giza plateau and all the evidence, and built it. And on April 3rd of 2000, first try, the thing ran. Like, I was happy. But, yeah.
Well, in the unit that you have there, is that from the mount? If I'm not mistaken, that was actually one of the first models that you had developed. Is that correct? The one that's right next to you, that's lit up in a very nice eerie blue color.
This is the next generation one.
Oh.
This is going to be one, it's almost finished, and it's going to be the first inkjet model. It has 27 inkjet ports that you can individually put ink into with it running, with the water running in through it, and pulsing. And the pulsing part was really the key, because I couldn't do any other models before, build something that was absolutely bulletproof. And this is literally bulletproof. The top is an 1.5 inch thick acrylic. It's going to have like 10 head bolts around it. So it's actually bolted into place. It's almost done. It'll be done within a week. And then to be able to actually run the model, inject ink into different ports, different colors, any color you want, and film it in slow-mo or
Cool.
whatever you want. It's in a controlled environment. It's going to be inside, temperature and humidity controlled, so it's camera friendly, and the glass doesn't steam up, fog up. I had that problem with other ones.
Now, taking a few steps, well, first of all, for anybody to build this, I'm going to say literally in your backyard, it's a feat in itself just from home engineering. Uh, and why, I should say, why do you think they built this in the first place? Like, did they, it obviously was for a purpose and not, it's like, hey, let's make something that's a hydraulic ram pump, without an ending. What do you think I'd say the goal was for the Egyptians if they built it for that purpose?
I don't think it was made for pumping water. It does that really well. It's extremely efficient. It's better than any hydraulic ram pump built by a huge factor, and it's also more flexible. And I've run, this is model number 4. So, but I've put millions of cycles through it, and it always runs. It's the best machine I've ever built. It always runs. Can't say that with a lot of machines.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that the design's right, but I've used it to pump water. It's a great water pump, but really what it was made for is what Chris Dunn had said. And he wrote in his book, The Giza Power Plant, which was published back in 1998. He had a very short blip in there about the subterranean chamber. And what he said was that the subterranean chamber housed the equipment which sent a vertical pulse up into the pyramid's core to King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber, but it caused the initial pulses to start the Great Pyramid to resonate. So that was what Chris Dunn had wrote. And when I first ran this and heard it and saw how everything was, how it had directed the pulse wave directly vertical and the aggressiveness of the pulse, I knew Chris was right immediately, and I wrote him in a couple days. Chris, you're right. It is a pulse. It's a pulse generator. I said it's a giant subwoofer underneath the Great Pyramid. And then later that year, I put a better terminology to it, which was hydraulics. It's water fluid. It's a pulse generator. So actually, they made it to create an extreme, we're talking really extreme pulse that shoots directly up into the core of the Great Pyramid, straight towards the Queen's Chamber, King's Chamber. And the King's Chamber itself, I think it's more for the King's Chamber, and it's a freestanding. The King's Chamber is made of rose quartz granite. It's freestanding from the walls and the floor. It has like some sort of texture or something. So it is made to resonate. So, and I know King's Chamber Grand Gallery is made to resonate as.
And that falls onto Doug Keenan's work. I know that you guys have talked multiple times. I've had him on the show way back when multiple times, and it's interesting to be able to see the ideas going back and forth with okay, well, it's resonating. Well, if one's resonating, the other pyramids is the receiver. That ideas about being able to image the solar system, that trying to use it for like astroastronomy or radio astronomy or something similar to that. These ideas are just gonna say that they're, to some people they would be out there, to others it would be groundbreaking. depending on which side of the fence you're on, I just think it's cool, one way or another. Now, when you're looking at the pyramid itself, uh, you go into work, let's say of like Robert Bivol, who will say, it if it wasn't necessarily machined for that, or he'll say that, or has said that there's no way that it could have held water because of the construction. It would have leaked like a sieve, and that's echoed through whether you're dealing with mainstream archaeology or, and I'm pretty sure he had mentioned that to me on an earlier show back in 2017, I believe. So, is that something that you have looked at, or has been brought to your attention to say, like, well, it couldn't have held water because, it's not airtight or it's not watertight, and it would have just been bursting out of the seams all over the place? Like, how have you approached that kind of argument?
Well, with that argument, my setup doesn't even put water into the upper part of the Great Pyramid, so it's it doesn't matter if it leaks or not because it's not filling it up.
Well, I think that's mostly for, some theories, not necessarily with yours directly, but some
I know
theories have
who's
had,
yours, yeah.
yeah,
The
like they'll have it
Kunkel,
directly within the chambers, and the chambers will be moving water back and forth, and
yeah,
where you're dealing directly with the subterranean chamber itself.
yeah.
N-
Yes, it's completely different. It's see that's the that's where the a lot of the confusion is it comes originally from Edward Kunkel. Edward Kunkel had proposed initially there was a construction pump underneath the Great Pyramid, which had the subterranean chamber, and he thought that provided initial water to just move the blocks. And then his second part of his theory, which he really expanded upon, is most of his stuff. And there's a fellow in Coos Bay, Oregon, who's just plagiarizing Kunkel's work and is wrong about it all. And he does stupid songs, but on YouTube. But he, but that they are saying that the pyramid itself used a vacuum system by using some fire up in the grand gallery area. And when you create a fire, the fire creates a vacuum and it sucks water up. And then they figured it did a double like, suction up to from the Queen's chamber up to the King's chamber. And then it was shot out of the shafts that go up and towards the top, upper part of the pyramid, and then figured they had irrigation.
Please don't be mentioning shooting out of any shafts here. This is a family show. Like,
so, but it was like, and then it went through. This was from Kunkel, and then dickheads. And it was the guy in Coos Bay. They're saying it's made for irrigation, and I'm telling you, it's not a pump. It's not made for irrigation. The water's all down in the below the bedrock. It's below the bedrock. It's not going to leak, and if it does leak, it doesn't matter. Even if it's porous limestone, it doesn't matter. It you'd be saturated, water saturated with a bit of oozing through the limestone. That's not a problem.
Now, how did the water get into the pyramid? Like the pyramid itself? Like obviously, there's a difference between your model in on your property that you've built, which is specifically around a perfect scenario of a water delivery system. Have you taken into account what the Nile would have looked like at that point, in terms of its banks, and obviously the Nile River has shifted its course over the millennia. Like how would they have gotten the water or used the water then for that use in that chamber at that point? Can you explain that process?
Yes, upstream in the Nile, it's probably I don't know exactly how many miles, but they actually had a dam up there and a channel system that went to the Fayum Oasis, which is called now. to a depression below sea level, large depression, but it used to be Lake Morris. So they actually had a big lake the size of Lake Erie that was uphill and upstream from the Nile. It's obvious on Google Earth, and it's in history books. But it was Lake Morris, and then there's tunnels absolutely everywhere in all the Giza Plateau. And there used to be a tunnel, they called it a charm or a well, that was basically in front of the door area of the Great Pyramid itself. And it was described by Petrie, was that other guy. It was documented, and it's since departed, but it went down 42 feet, and then it got filled with sand, and then somehow it left. But the one thing, so it was just a gravity feed from the Lake Morris down a tunnel systems, which is everywhere around there, and it just gravity fed to the moat area around the Great Pyramid itself. All the pyramids had walled enclosures. All of them did, and that's not even controversial, like a moat system and an overflow.
Now, like the subterranean chamber seems to have been quarried around the start of the construction of the pyramid, or possibly even well before that. Is it possible that they could have been using something very similar to this prior to the construction, or is there evidence that this is something that was recent, or they made modifications to it?
It does appear that it was from before the pyramid itself was built. There was a test shaft in that general area where they did a couple different things different. Chris Dunn talks about it, and he just said it was like a test site. He called something different. So it was made before the pyramid itself, and it doesn't need the pyramid there at all. So you could actually take the pyramid off, and the whole sub-assembly still runs. It's just the pyramid itself is just a machine that's sitting on top of it.
And it probably wouldn't make much sense to do that. It's like, if you're blasting your tunes with the your back door open, all the bass is going out, and it's like you'll annoy the neighbors, but you're not going to do much good with it. Now when you started building this, like, it's obviously it's very difficult for you to be able to match your measurements for your model, tool turn for tool turn against the real subterranean chamber. Like, how did you model the measurements?
The measurements, I came to use a scale of a 1/4 inch to the foot. It worked out really well for the shafts because they're basically 4 foot, 3 foot, and 2 foot shafts. So you go, 4/4 is 1 inch, and to be able to do square shafts, 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch. And so I just used the 1:48 scale. It made it this size for the sub chamber. It's like 11 inches by 7 inches.
And
the room, which is 27 feet by 46 feet by 13 foot high. So this room, you walk around, walk up on the steps and stuff, it's a big room. It's the biggest room in the pyramid, or under it.
No, to some people they'll say, okay, that's cool. Oh, okay, no, he's got a flashlight. I thought there was like, oh, we've got a light in there. Okay.
So he's got a flashlight. That works.
Somebody's got to do it.
It's like we're going to turn this machine on and we're going to ascend, ladies and gentlemen. There are always going to be people who are going to criticize or say that the idea is crazy. The fact that the fact that it's working is a testament in itself. You are going to have individuals who are going to say that, well, it's not an exact replica, or modifications to the measurements were made based on the needs to actually get it working in a model versus real life. Now, when you're talking about you've like copied the measurements almost exactly, like are there any differences from like from the original construction to what you've constructed?
Yeah, I did do a little bit of modification, and it had to do with the descending passage. I used a round 1.25 inch pipe instead of making the full thing 1 inch square on the interior. I didn't see a big difference in the flow for the two long pipes on. I think all the interior section, the square pipes are critical. And so I made all the square shafts, everything as close to accurate as possible. It's probably 95% accurate.
And how are you accounting for the water flow pressure?
The water flow pressure, there's two pressures. There's just the gravitational pressure, the head pressure, and it's in the Great Pyramid itself, it's 100 feet plus 30 foot. On this model, it's probably 7 feet plus basically 7 feet, which is 7 feet times it's 0.2. Is it 0.28 pounds per foot? So it's not that much pressure on the model until you actually run it, and running it involves a valve which stops instantly. Water flow causes the valve to shut, and when water closes the valve instantaneously, since it's nearly incompressible waters, so it does a water hammer, which causes a giant shock wave, like old pipes in old houses. You turn off a faucet somewhere and the pipes would go bang, bang, bang. But that's the same thing. It's a water hammer.
And yeah, that'll usually happen with metal pipes. Like even here up in Canada, we haven't really used metal. Um, I think since like the 50s or 60s. Mostly, it's been PVC since the late 70s on. So getting the water hammer effect is a little hard in most houses. Um,
They have
it's
water hammer arresters too, and put in the houses. It's just a little air gap. It's a little copper tube that goes up. It has an air gap, and then plumbers should put it on the pipes at a point. It's the air kills water hammer.
Oh yeah,
So
major difference in pressure. Air is a lot more compressible. Water, as you said,
yes,
is not. So,
and,
well,
but on this model, even this model, that just by having the water hammer and the static pressure, just if it's not moving, the water pressure in the pipes is like 3 psi, 3 pounds per square inch, which is very low. And then as soon as you hit the throw the wastegate valve on, and it's doing the water hammer effect, it's no less than 150 psi at the valve, but really I'm thinking it's when you get into instantaneous or near instantaneous spikes, it's got to be over 450 psi. So you got a scaling factor that's a 3 versus 450, like 150 factor, just by introducing the water hammer. I know it's that much because it breaks the PVC connections.
as I recall, you've discovered that a few times.
A few times, a few different PVC materials. I use Schedule 80. I've used the white regular PVC, and I've used like the conduit, which is a little more flexible. And I broke them all. And so I know it's a good spike pressure. Plus, I measured with the gauge. With gauges, I've measured 100. I've seen 150 psi at the wastegate. And then the pump, if you use it as a pump itself, it'll pump at put out 45 psi from 3, so it's a factor of 15 just from the head pressure, just from the gravity of the water above the subchamber itself.
I find it interesting that, for the Egyptians to have constructed this type of, like, basically a partless machine, and it's the only one of its kind that's been seen, at least that I can recall off the top of my head. Like, while you were doing your research and building this, like, have you run across any other potential, potential either copies or other instances of this, either in another pyramid or in another building or even another cave? Not necessarily to this design, but with a similar idea or function.
No, it's unique that I've never seen this anywhere. I've never seen even hydraulic ram pumps that utilize the pressure spike as its main function, like to cause a resonance as opposed to trying to just pump water. The pumping water on this thing, that's just a real byproduct. It's not even necessary. In fact, I normally run it with it not pumping water.
Yep.
That generally alleviates this one argument that the dead end shaft never had an opening at the end, and so mom was wrong because there wasn't opening at the end. Well, I run it normally with the dead end. It's just a hydraulic pulse generator.
I'm trying to recall who would have said that.
It's
I know there was, my goodness, who was it? Like Denver and I were talking about this the last show, and bless his heart, love him to death, and he's always good for a laugh in that regard. Yeah, no, and so to anybody who doesn't know, we're not going to mention his name because, well, I don't.
He doesn't deserve it.
Well, that too. He has been on the show before, and then let's just say as after that he was hours and hours of entertainment. Over that, he'll come in and talk, and it's like, well, would have gotten into an argument. So I'm like, I wonder what John Cadman has to say about this. Tag John. He'll come in. I'm like, oh my God.
He's not a friend of mine.
No, I know, and that was the intent, was just to be able to I'm going to say annoy and aggravate him. It's like, if he's going to troll, I'm going to troll back just as hard, and I know you love that stuff.
Thank you.
And obviously, I'm at the age now where I don't have the time or the energy or the awake hours where I can put into that anymore. But it's good to reminisce on the good old days. Now, when you're looking at this machine, and obviously, not accounting for, any potential lessons that may have been learned from certain individuals who should not be named failures, like, what other things that have you discovered during the last 23 years now of developing this that, kind of surprised you?
There's a bunch of things that really surprised me. The pressures blew me away. It took so much to actually get a model so it wouldn't self-destruct. Just this model itself, small model, not a lot of head pressure on it. But if you just do simple calculations, just the surface area, if you have like 7 inches by 11 inches, that's 77 square inches on the surface on the top. And if you run a spike of, let's say on the low side, let's say 40 PSI. I know that's very low on this, but 40 PSI times 70, that's 2,800.
I'm thinking, like, in terms of PSI,
it's like a ton. It puts out a ton of pressure upwards from this small area, and that's just from this model.
And I find that crazy because, like, even like if you think about pressures, most people, when they think pressure, they think tire pressure, and the average tire, depending on the size, the maker, the model, could be anywhere from about 28 to 35 PSI. And if you pop a car tire, you just hear that bang, and that's a tremendous amount of force, and that's just air that's been pressurized in there. If you're talking that much pressure with water, if anything were to go wrong, heaven forbid, especially
Oh,
with,
it breaks things. It breaks things. Yes.
well, like how many pipes did you go?
Oh.
How many pipes did you go through in like even just the last year alone? Like have you ruled out different types of fasteners, or like, oh, you can't use the screw-ons, or you can't use glue? Um,
Yeah, I eliminated a lot of things. I right now I'm just running. I use the conduit PVC, and I use the heavier stuff. So it's a Schedule 80. It's glued together. The stuff you could run, tractors over it. It's really durable, and then it also doesn't have any threads. And I had problems with having. I used steel pipe at one point, Schedule 80 steel pipe. But then at the unions, you've got a little upward air area where you get air in it, and then air kills high water handles. So that wasn't really good. So steel wasn't good. And the main thing is just serious overkill on the builds. If I'm using an 1.5 inch thick acrylic top, and the thing's heavy, but it'll be great for filming. You can see through it. But it weighs like 30 pounds. Just the acrylic top that goes on this model. It's gonna have 10 head bolts on it, and just so it doesn't flex and break. But I've broken tons of, broke one concrete model. The very first light pulse I did on it broke the concrete, and I still have that one kicking around. It's like, yeah, it broke this. One pulse. It was a light pulse. It was the lightest pulse I could do.
Oh, concrete. Like if it's not reinforced concrete, it's a crapshoot. Like, have you considered transparent aluminum? No.
I've never heard of it.
For anybody who's under the age of like 30, it's a Star Trek, it's a Star Trek 4 joke.
Maybe it'd be really cool. I mean, I'd love to do it in other materials, but this is what I'm using right now. It's going to be epoxy, and but it's going to be so thick. I mean, the epoxy is going to be yay thick, and I've got all these individual inkjet tubes. They're actually from inkjet printer. They come like they come in 8 strands wide. So I'll have all the inkjet out through the molding. I'll inject ink into it, but it's just really overkill on the build, so that it won't break. And it's a ridiculous overkill at that point for such a small assembly.
How are you sourcing the acrylic? Like, do you have like a local acrylic guy who, like, hey man, I broke through another one. Can you get me another slab? And he's just like, oh, are you putting somebody's kid through college with this?
I went and did the internet, and I was just looking for, I was looking for Lexan, but I talked to a young guy down in, I think it was Long Beach, California, but it was a that's their specialty, plastics, Industrial Plastics Incorporated, I think is what it's called. And so I told him what I was building, and I said, yeah, I need it super strong, and it has to be very clear. He's going to be doing filming through it. And so he hooked me up. He said, use this. I paid him, of course. It's like, I think it was like $300 for the piece. It made it, and it's going to work. And then the epoxy I bought, like in the 2-part epoxy, the 4. I bought 2 for. I bought 8 gallons for the pour. I was just going to get all the same one, and I got it from the epoxy store in Michigan or somewhere. And so they sent me the 8 gallons of the 2-part, so I have enough to do the pour. But that's what we used to make the whole model. Whole model's just small pours of the 2-part clear epoxy. They would just do, and I had a silicone mold from that pretty much used for the form that I put together years ago. We
Now,
actually have
with
silicone mold.
with the
So,
actual like subterranean chamber part, have you run into issues with that breaking?
not once I built it strong enough. I just overkill built.
I,
And then no problems at all.
it's mostly just
The
like the water
first, the
flows.
first one's broke. First one's broke. I mean, they just expanded and cracked and did everything wrong. They were made out of epoxy and fiberglass. They're pretty thick, and they just expanded. Oh, it needs to be in reinforced concrete or something. So the first one that I actually made work back in 2000 was I put it in plastic recycle bins, but containers, and poured concrete and rock and rebar. I put all sorts of steel chunks in there and poured it. It's like, I hope it works because this isn't ever coming apart. And it never did break. Made some mistakes on it. And also I regretted putting any sort of ferrous material in it. So I don't have ferrous materials in any steel or iron.
If it breaks, it all of a sudden you've got ballistic material shooting out in either direction.
The main reason I was looking is the pyramid itself seems to be some sort of magnetic machine. From a whole bunch of people's research, everybody from like the Golads, Anatoly Golad in Moscow, his giant pyramid structure. It's 144 foot. The one they did all the shape experimentation outside Moscow. That's brilliant work. But it has to be, it's a magnetic machine. And Patrick Flanagan, the originator of pyramid power, it's got to be aligned to north-south. It's a magnetic machine. It does stuff. And so if you have a magnetic machine, you don't want to, steel in it anywhere to do whatever it would do. So I just made sure I used non-ferrous materials.
Now, like if you used ferrous materials, like what it just wouldn't work, or it just wouldn't have the same, like the spirit of the machine, like not spirit, I mean metaphorical, spirit of the word. Like the spirit of a law versus the word of a law. Like is it more of like just a tradition thing, or is there something that wouldn't work or would happen if it were ferrous?
I just don't know, and I just try to be as consistent with the original building. So I just made sure there was no ferrous materials. Use brass or copper. You could use brass head bolts for the bolt the head down. So it's just attention to detail. So did attention to detail on everything in the room, all the fins. There's just hydraulic fins in there, and all these weird pieces or weird structure within the section itself. Just attention to detail.
Now everyone asks, what are the pyramids, but nobody ever asks why are the pyramids. So I'm going to ask, at least in terms of the driving need to build this. I'll do my best Peter Griffin philosopher impression. Why? What drove you to say, what, damn it, I'm going to build this thing? Like I understand the interest, I understand the need to say, okay, well, it works, but is there anything deeper to that?
It's calling. Oh, it's a calling. That's why. It's called my name and it's possessed me. Well,
you build it, they'll come.
Yeah, if I build it, they'll come. Build the dreams. Well, the original one, as each build comes along, I tend to test more aspects of it. The first one just showed that it was a pump, and it was a messy model, and it had a lot of errors and stuff in it. But then the second one, it was 16 years later, and Chris Dunn was coming, and and I discovered a glacial boulder sitting on the property that was split. Happened to be there.
I remember that.
It just happened to be the right size to put a model in it
Like,
and
oh,
fill it with concrete and build this hydraulic pulse generator in the middle of a glacial boulder that's sitting on bedrock, because it was split by the glacier when it was here, and it was kind of meant to be. And that one it worked brilliantly. It still works. It worked brilliantly. It works brilliantly. And that one had done a bunch of setup to be able to do audio recordings directly above the subchamber itself through the concrete. So I could actually record what frequencies this was putting out, plus the amplitude. You know, how loud is it? Is it just a little pissy little beep, you know, or is it something substantial? What's the frequency range? And that itself is a huge challenge as far as I had help by Robert Vaughter, who's a sound engineer down in Monterey, and he's as educated and fluent about all the ancient Egypt stuff as Chris Dunn, so it says a lot. Dunn's probably knows more than anybody that I know of. And Vaughter's the same.
well,
But I was just gonna say, so he helped me as far as getting the lower frequencies, because I wanted to record down to, well, human hearing cuts off at 50 hertz. And so microphones generally just naturally drop the range below that for the most part, unless you get better microphones. So he told me which microphone to get down to 5 hertz. So I wanted to get below 7 hertz, which is the Earth's frequency, Schumann resonance. I want to get below Schumann resonance because I want to see if it's in that range and what sort of amplitude. And I want the full range all the way up. I want accurate recordings of amplitude without noise and guaranteed accuracy. So he hooked me up with I think it's a UMIC microphone, very accurate, down to 5 hertz. And then he told me how to isolate it to get accurate recordings. And then he also helped me with the program to do here's the program you use, because it's free, but it goes down to 5 hertz, and most audio or sound analysis programs don't go down to 5 hertz, and it does. And then he helped do the analysis. And what we found was it's extremely aggressive on the lower range frequencies. So in the boulder build, on the boulder, it's like 15 feet across or something. It's a big boulder.
yeah.
And, yeah, it's like 5 meters across. And the recordings from it, the isolated recordings, I recorded it running, and I'm just using PVC pipe. And the check valve is not, it's not what would be a Giza. Giza would be the valve itself would be granite, and it'd be in a basalt sort of like sleeve. It'd be 4 foot wide and sliding and water, and I mean the aggression of that would be absolutely monumental. It'd be extremely aggressive, extremely loud, and it worked. But even with that small, I used the plunger, the sliding plunger with the O-ring, and it's through a plastic pipe, but it's stabilized at the end, so the pipe doesn't flex too much. But even that, the recordings from just the water and the shock wave running up this plastic pipe, and then being reflected at an elbow and going up into the subchamber itself, and then up through the concrete. So it's being transferred from the water through the concrete, and then up to where the microphone is, that's isolated and freestanding. That was louder than taking a sledgehammer and slamming the boulder right next to where that microphone was. So it's more aggressive. Just this water spike going through the water pipe and reflected and being transferred through rock. It's more aggressive than a 6-pound maul being slammed against the boulder right in the vicinity of where that microphone is. That's it's not subtle. It's very aggressive.
If they had this like giant, granite valve,
Yes,
in the pyramid itself, like how did they get it in there? I'm gonna like did they excavate, put it in, and then cover it back up, or did they cut it directly out of the bedrock?
it's kind of like you've got the right ideas. It's actually down by the Sphinx, and the Nile used to be right at the Sphinx. It was at the Pause, just in front of it. There's a temple in front of the Sphinx Pause, and the Nile used to be right there. So it's only 2,000 feet away. That's not far. But the valve would have been closer to where the Sphinx is. It's a 4-foot square pipe, and they would have just actually, the best design from an engineering standpoint would just be to be tunneled straight down, where you've got a shaft that comes down. You just tunnel down. You've got bedrock before and after. You've got bedrock after, and just put in some some sleeves, like in cars it'd be like valve sleeves or a piston sleeve.
Okay.
So you got a piston, you got sleeves, you got iron sleeve around the piston so it doesn't wear. Well, this would just use granite sleeves cut down into the limestone bedrock and a base, and then all they'd have to do is put a top of it, and some rocks. They're very smart people, and so all the shock wave is actually being, and you'd have to have a valve seat, so it wouldn't wear. You wouldn't want to granite against limestone. That'd be terrible.
Yeah, limestone's gone.
Yeah, exactly. So so you'd have you'd have granite against granite. That's fine. But then you have the whole limestone bedrock way beyond it. That's going to handle the shock wave. No wear and tear. And if you have to do maintenance, change the valve, which is just a little sliding granite box, kind of like a sarcophagus. You just take pull up the top, replace the sleeves and the base or the valve seat, and drop new assembly in there, and cover back up and run again. It's made for maintenance. It'd be really
like you've had like Chris Dunn seen it. You've had I'm going to say the entire world has seen it, because you have been on Ancient Aliens a few times. So if you're looking at, I'm going to say mainstream like in terms of Egyptologists or archaeologists, what has their reaction been over the last couple of years as this has been getting out there? Because I understand for some individuals in in academia, anything if it's on Ancient Aliens, it's basically considered entertainment, but you're dealing with actual proved built engineering. So it's not just supposition. This is like, hey, this is a model. It's working. Explain this. Like, what has their reaction been to that?
Silence, disregard. I don't know. I don't get anything. It's strange. It's really strange. It's just silence, because it's been published. It's been published in Dr. John DeSalvo's book, the Complete Pyramid Source Book. I had a chapter in that back in 2003, and he's a mainstream author. He was a biophysicist professor at Johns Hopkins University, and he's he's an educated guy. And he also has a lot of other books, and he's the director of the Great Pyramid of Giza Research Association, which I'm part of, and I've got some articles on there, and as does Joe Parr and the Russian, Anatoly Golod, and the Russian research is all there for the shape effects, which are phenomenal. No, I just don't get anything. It's really strange. And I've reached out. Here's how strange it is. The town I live in Bellingham, Washington, and it's a growing town, but it was always a kind of a college mill town up by the Canadian border, up by Vancouver. Really, like 20 miles from Vancouver to the border. We're a Canadian suburb, okay?
It's so close you can smell the high mortgage rates.
I see, yeah, they live here and they shop here because it's half the price. We're like Tijuana for Vancouver. We're cheaper here, but it's not anymore, but it was.
Yeah, we were running into the same thing with crap, I can't even remember it now. There's an American town across the border, very close. Like you just head down the 416.
Gas town.
Yeah, like people will take their pets there because the veterinarians aren't anywhere near as expensive as they are in Ottawa.
Yes. I go to the next county down for my veterinarian because the Canadians come here and it's targeted for the Canadians and it's really expensive in this county. And so I drive 20 miles south to my vet there.
See, I gotta look this up now because
Farm
this is gonna
town.
bug me. Google, Ottawa, city development maps. Like we're pretty close to the border. Like where I live is about halfway between the city limits and Ogdenburg, New York. So it's about halfway between, or twice the distance. Which probably would be going by this. Search Adamson. Measure distance.
Edmonton. Yeah, Edmonton.
Distance to here. Yeah, let's say it's about 50 clicks, maybe 60. So we're about like I live about 60 clicks from the American border, and
okay,
the amount of people. Although like you're talking east versus west, so upstate New York is much different than Washington State. Kind of the same thing. It's like people from Ottawa are not the same as people from Vancouver. Completely different culture.
Oh my God, yes, east and west, very different in Canada, especially Canada. Here too, but not as distinct. I mean, the States.
Is it close to Edmonton?
No, not even close. Edmonton's upwards of about 2,000 kilometers, 2,500 kilometers.
Oh, that's a ways.
Yeah, well, it's about two. If I would say between where I am to where you are, it's about 3/4 of the way.
Okay.
So yeah, well, again, you're also talking about like the U.S. and Canada, it's continent apart. I'm also realizing like, it's about 11 o'clock here. It's 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock where you are right now.
Yeah, it's 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Specific.
So there you go.
I deal with the Pacific East Coast timing.
It's one of the reasons why I'm doing the later shows, because we always had big audiences out in California and up the West Coast. Go figure. So it's like, if I get them after dinner time, they'll probably be a little more appreciative than me saying like, I'm just getting off work and Den of Lore's on. Like, okay, I can stand it. It's not really that big of a problem. But like, if you're dealing with I'm going to say like this would normally be around the time where people are starting to sit down for dinner, and obviously if you're doing your testing and with the machine on, or if you're doing recordings or you're doing a demonstration, it's probably not going to be at around this time because you don't want to tick your neighbors off more than you probably already have building this thing. So again, I also don't know how large of a plot of land. It could be several acres. It could be the size of a backyard. I don't know. I've never been there.
Well, it's on a 10-acre
Okay,
parcel,
so
and
then
there's like in the lots on this. It's on top of a mountain, like Squatter Mountain. I guess it's a mountain. It's more like a hill. Um, and there's I don't know. I've got 5 neighbors. The 2 of them are relatives. So
it's like, John, there's a bear in the area. Turn the machine on. It's like, okay, we'll try and scare it off. The bear's just there with like glow sticks, just dancing next to him. Like, well, at least it's occupied. I'm sorry, guys, I tried.
awesome.
How you've built the machine, you've gone through several iterations. The new model is there.
Yes.
What are you hoping to scale up? Like, are you looking to scale up, or do you have plans for this? Have you already marked out your pyramid foundations? Have you cleared off a plateau near a river that you're ready to get work on? Help me out here and give me an idea of what the next step is.
The next step is actually with the inkjet, because I really want to do some analysis of, okay, going backwards a little bit. I have done the testing with the inkjets back in 2002, and when Steve Mehler was out here, and I had, digital cameras weren't very good back then, and I just had glass and couldn't do any pulses because the slightest pulse would break the glass. It did. But I was able to determine the flows. And what came out was it does a beautiful Fibonacci spiral vortex, a 3D one to boot. It does the most amazing, like almost a tornado type vortex. It's gorgeous. And so now this is before it's pulsing. And so with this inkjet, I'll be able to actually run it, have it pulsing. So you have shock waves going up and back and forth through it, and also have the water flow. And I really am interested in vortices with the extreme pressure shock wave that goes through the middle of the vortice. We're starting to look at. I'm watching a lot of things on the epic tornadoes documentaries. This is really almost parallel to, let's say, the vortice of a tornado going through the pipe, and this one goes down to the earth. But there's a extreme shock wave or a pressure that's going back and forth, independent from the flow. It's completely independent from the flow, the water flow. The shock wave doesn't even care about it. It's the velocity and everything. So that would be equivalent to, say, a lightning strikes in tornadoes. It's completely independent, but they are related. The lightning strike doesn't care if there's spinning wind and stuff like that, or debris. It just sees a differential in electrical differential in the ionosphere down to the ground. So this is very similar to that.
And again, just a shout out to Taps here for the $20 super chat. He says that my friend is back, and obviously he means John, because I'm everyone's friend. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the support. Now, have you had it struck by lightning while it's running? Like, is this a worry or a concern?
No, not only that. There's not a lot. We don't have a lot of lightning here. It's very rare, like a few times a year. It's not like East Coast, or the plains. Lightning doesn't really happen much, but
Toronto had lightning, thunder, snowstorm.
I heard about that in Connecticut because my woman's in Connecticut, and so she's like, there's the snow, lightning, and thunder. I said, what? What the hell are you talking about? I don't even know what that is.
Basically it's a thunderstorm. Lake effect with Lake Ontario. Usually you've got a lot of humid, warm air that kind of permeates the air around the Niagara region and Niagara on the Lake region south
so
of there.
You're right by Danny Kerr.
No, I'm probably about a 7 hour drive
Oh,
northeast of him.
okay. Okay.
Haven't had the chance. I keep saying like, "Oh man, we should like hang out," and I'm like, I haven't been down to the
He's
Niagara
so
area.
cool too.
Yeah, no, he's
Dan,
been in the chat. He keeps messaging, and I'll like glance at it because I've got the laptop in front of me, and then I hear it. It's something funny, and I'm like, "Did Danny say
he's
that?" And
funny.
it's like just message redacted. I'm like, like, oh man, like,
His work on Tesla pyramids,
yes,
he's got a lot of really, he has fascinating work. I don't really understand all the upper pyramid assembly works and theories so much because it doesn't really hit home to me. And that's nothing against anybody's works. I just, it's just, I don't understand it. It wasn't the piece of puzzle that was given to me. I understand the subchamber. That was kind of given to me. And so I just try to do it, the subchamber, as accurately as possible so other people can, confidently base their part of the pyramid works and incorporate mine as part of that machine. So they have confidence in my work being not sketchy.
now
It's reproduced accurately.
well, it's funny because like Danny's in chat. I like Doug's in chat. Like basically, whenever we're having on the show, Danny and Doug come out of the woodwork.
They're
And
the best.
well, of course they are. Like their work is even though they like their work is say it builds on yours, as you said. It goes to the upper parts of the pyramid, and it's like part and parcel with anything kind of within the alternative sphere. Is that you'll have some people who their work is diametrically opposed. You've got others where it's like this is a little too coincidental, where it is either built on or it fits well and it's rational. And it's good to be able to see that kind of collaboration. And they're fantastic guys. So but yeah, like getting out to Niagara on the Lake, it's kind of one of those things where if you're ever out east, they've got fantastic wine. I'm not much of a wine drinker nowadays, but it's a good time. You go on the tour, you go visit a few places, you chat up the maitre d at these wineries, they give you extra booze, you stumble back to the hotel wondering what the heck happened. It's great. Fantastic times. Fantastic times. My wife would say different. She's like, oh my goodness. It's like, Chris, why do you have to keep saying the word tannin so many times? Like, sorry,
Yeah. And shout out to Doug Keenan. I mean, my God, the guy, he did CAD layouts for all the Giza Plateau, all the pyramids. He has it all down to all the details.
Mhm.
He did a 3D print of model of the Giza Plateau. It has the tiniest little sphinx. It's all accurate. It's gorgeous. And he's done the granite blocks for the King's Chamber. He's
Mhm.
3D printed those. And his works on now. Doug Keenan did Big Sky Map, and his work is the basically radar projection of the sky to look for anomalies. Anyways, that's kind of the best, like comets or anything that might impact us. That's my basic understanding. And then I have to give a shout out to this one fellow, George Zuger, who introduced me to a bunch of good guys.
It's Chris. George, I just throw in there. It's my middle name.
I
do it. I do it because it sounds cool. Everyone calls me, like, the amount of times it's like, is Georgie there? I'm like, no, sorry.
Oh, apologies. No, I am thinking George Howard's work that you had him on your couple shows. It's George Howard, right? The Mammoth.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And also Randall Carlson.
Randall.
Okay, now I didn't know about their works, and I very much appreciate their works.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very impressed. So big shout out to Dana Bloor. I mean, Chris, you've had some really amazing people on there, and you exposed me to their knowledge base, and they're right. They're
it's
right.
it like their work is like, especially when you're dealing with the Younger Dryas, and like that's
Yes.
an entire different show just on itself. But like
Yes.
yeah, there was the big thing that kept being said over and over again from the opponent's side to their point of view of why it wasn't, where it's like those spherules were bug poop.
Bug
But it's
poop.
like,
I know.
why that's the thing that's sticking out in my head. It's like, okay, so the bug poop is everywhere. Like, is it, like these spherules were found at the black mat layer in multiple sites on several continents, and it's not possible that the exact same bug was pooping all over the place at the exact same time when the species may not have existed. So, logically, probably not. It is heavily supported, and it's talked about. At least it's being accepted from, uh, like even with some mainstream acceptance. I'm not going to go into the whole Atlantis because that's an entirely different
Right.
show
That's completely.
altogether. Um, but the fact is, at least that there are touches from, depending on which school of thought you're from, whether that knowledge, if there was knowledge from a potential hypothetical civilization, you know, is there some type of knowledge that was carried forward and then used into building the Great Pyramid and a machine like this? The fact that we haven't seen anything else out there, it's interesting to say, okay, well, if this was built, where did they get the idea from? Why was it done? If this was done to a plan, this is a like a multi-millennia plan to build this machine, to then build these other pyramids, to then, if we're going on with Doug's work, to then use that machine to then, you know, use it for astronomy purposes or for signaling purposes or for what have you. If you look at it from a microcosm, it's like, okay, everything fits. But if you look at it over a much longer time scale, it seems to some people that, okay, it's not very plausible. No, but is it possible? Yes. It's also possible that, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow morning stepping out on my road where there are no buses. But at the same time, it's like, okay, where's the evidence to say one way or another? And it's people can produce it, but you actually have a working machine. So how is it people can ignore it when it's right, literally right there in front of you?
Not sure. Not sure. Oh no. One thing I was going to say is I actually we have a university in this town, Western Washington University. I went there for a few years and I've contacted them. I'm comfortable with the campus and everything like that because I went there and it's probably 20 minutes away from this boulder build. And I've contacted, literally went in and sat in the class and talked to the professors of various ancient histories and told them I did and invite them up and also I figured they'd probably got bite on it since they're professors and stuff. You might want to see this. Nothing on that. And I contacted the physics department years ago, and I zero.
What about
I was got
engineers? Have you gone to the engineering department and said, "Hey, man, come out to the woods. I got a rock to show you."
soon as you say pyramid, though, it just shuts it down, and they just won't. They won't acknowledge it, and it just seems like it's going to be really an embarrassment to them when it eventually comes out that they didn't even do any research or even anything to go 20 minutes away and actually observe and do some ecology things.
Now, interesting thing. This is from Danny, who said a pyramid go, and he goes and deletes it again. So I actually remember this one. Something along the lines of something pyramid go bang. The pyramid sends out a pulse, and
Yes.
the other pyramid receives it, and it can pick up things like, let's say, an asteroid. Okay, that's cool. Is a possibility. How would they? Okay, so it's received. what is that reading then? Like, what is the reading displayed on? How are they able to take that information and then put it into a something that can then be interpreted by somebody? Like, again, for us, we use computer screens, or people who have Braille have the Braille readers that they can then read with their fingertips. And I'm not saying that in a manner of trying to disprove it or trying to logic it out of the conversation, but it's just kind of interesting to say, okay, well, if they need to interpret that information, how would they do it?
Uh, uh, Beetle Dung.
Beetle dung.
Yeah.
Now, by reading it, by eating it, and then hallucinating about it, do they hook
I'm sure
themselves
that's
up?
it.
Like, did they shove it directly up them, up the backside, and it opens up their chakras? Help me out here.
Well, but when I was in California, that's what we did with it anyway. I don't.
Man,
It was good too. I tell you, it was good.
like, well, the 80s must have been, and I was gonna say like, oh, the 60s. I'm like, no, that's a little bit too early. That's insulting. 70s, probably.
I was around in the 70s.
No, like, okay, like the mid 80s must have been pretty interesting times. It's like everyone's doing, the skiing on the White Mountains, and we're dealing with beetle dung enemas. That's you're from Washington, right? Like, you were born in that area.
I was born in Bellingham, which is here.
Okay.
Then I was exported for school years by my mom down to kind of the beach area by LA airport. It was really a great area. Playa del Rey back in the 70s. It was great. It was awesome. It was like just poor surfers down there, and it was a great beach. And as soon as I graduated high school, came back. I'm out of here.
Well, like, now that we've gotten the like, there's only so many ways I can ask. Why did you build a pyramid? Like, we already answered that question. Like, why did you build it? Well, because. Okay, cool, it works. How did you get to the point where you're in school, you're like, okay, I'm out of here, and then you end up on an Alaskan, fishing, a crabbing boat, and then back to Washington State to become an engineer and to build this model?
Well, in this area, Bellingham, Seattle, all this area, all the crab boats are from here. And so the whole fishing fleet up in Dutch harbors, like all the crew, and it's the college kids go up to Alaska for the salmon seasons for make money, pay for college. So it's just really common to go up there. It's all they've done for ages. And so I was just started going up there to pay for college, and because I was starving, and got kind of, they saw us smart, so they kept going into started working with the engineers on the boats instead of just working on processors and stuff, and started going to the engine room and working on all the refrigeration, electrical stuff, and I mean, and power plants and fabrication. We did everything. So I just kind of got. I mean, it was a job, and it paid really well, especially at the time, and so that kind of did go Alaska for a couple months and then pay for school, and then eventually just kind of got sucked into engineering on the crab boats because it paid ridiculously well at the time. It was, it doesn't translate now well. It was like 15 grand a month was pretty normal, and for the crab,
That translates pretty well now.
No, so it'd be like making like 100 grand a month in today's money. So that's it, and that wouldn't be Canadian funds, be U.S. funds. So I know there's exchange.
So it's like 100. Yeah,
so it paid really well. And
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can do this for a couple of months and not die, and then you have time off, but then they'd want you back on the boat too fast, and you didn't have time to blow the money. Strippers and hookers and cocaine to Hawaii. So one of the chiefs did that sort of stuff. He's probably dead. But it's the stories of how they had to blow as much money as possible during the month they were off, and it says, but this
sorry.
wasn't really my calling so much. I wasn't really interested in pyramids, honestly. I just thought it was an overrated pile of rocks. That was my opinion until I started coming across the accuracy, especially Chris Dunn's work on the machined artifacts. His work's phenomenal on the accuracy. It's space age precision on so many artifacts. And
it's not. Well, truth be told, and this is to. I'm more of a realist when it comes to the overall engineering feats of ancient cultures. It's like I don't prescribe necessarily to the ancient alien hypothesis with regards to everything. Do not know how it was built, so must be aliens, because I believe in the ingenuity of man and man being human, not men, women in terms of just being able to figure things out.
Right.
The accuracy for the fact that they were still using bronze metals for a majority of their construction and weaponry, to get that close to true north is impressive. If it were to anybody else out there, I think Graham Hancock was right with regards to if they was space aliens, it would have been bang on true north. It's off by a couple of degrees. So even for that, the fact that they did that with string, some sticks and whatever whatever they built for compasses back then, that's impressive. Like, I have a hard time trying to be able to butter my toast evenly in the morning. So the fact that they did this 5,000 years ago, yeah, I got to say that's kind of a testament to what our species is capable of doing.
Right. I'm going with it was just a previous civilization. It was people, it was humans. And it was just we're hit by the comet, Younger Dryas. That's pretty obvious that there was a huge event that, the Black Mat event. And it's pretty much wiped out most of humanity. And like the Netflix series of Graham Hancock's, where you had Randall Carlson and, that was it, Apocalypse or I can't think of the name of it right offhand. But it shows that from all angles that we're flooded. We're flooded now still 500 feet. It was just it was a civilization that was wiped out, and the pyramids are just remnants of that. There's machined artifacts. If nothing else, the bull boxes of the Serapeum, if nothing else, there's 13 of them. They're optical precision to within 11 feet by 13 feet by 8 feet, machined out of single pieces of granite that came from somewhere else, and they're underground. And Chris Dunn took his ultra precision, the right angles, the squares, and the straight edges, and it's optical precision. Like these are machined artifacts. And so it was from a previous civilization that got wiped out, Younger Dryas event.
Do you think it's possible that it's not necessarily machined, but people who had a lot of time on their hands with nothing else to do and just, years and years of expertise?
No, optical precision. He puts a straight edge up against the box, granite box, and shines a flashlight, and there's no light that goes in between this ultra precision, straight edge. That's you couldn't do that with anything.
I think you could. I think if somebody's job for 20 years was, okay, your entire job for 20 years is to work on this one side.
No, no, I can do it. Can do it. Can do it. It's like body work. You're not going to do optical precision, even with Bondo and stuff. You're not going to
No,
do
I know
it.
people I know people who can. My late uncle was a master body worker, and what he could do with Bondo was very
But
impressive.
we're getting optical precision though, and it was
Well,
granite. It's
optical
like
precision is
two one hundred thousandths of an inch in a 2 foot span. That's like one.
well, we're making supposition. Like I'm saying, it's possible. Is it likely? I don't know. I wasn't there 3,000 4,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago when it was built. I'm just thinking. I'm just saying that I'm of the mind that if you get a master builder, getting close to perfection when that's literally all you do every single day. If it takes you 20 years to even, let's say you've got 10 people who are working on one box, or let's see, so 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, let's say you get nine master craftsmen who for 20 years their entire job is to get one side as perfect as possible, and that's literally all they do. I would think that if they're taking their time and they're using the proper tools and the proper measurements and they've got the proper technique, they would get that kind of precision if they were to take that long to be able to do it. Because even we don't necessarily know how long it took them to how long it took, how many people worked on it, what construction techniques. We're basing our our perspectives from what we know is possible and trying to be able to project it on the workmanship from 20 from millennia ago. And I'm saying that is it possible that Chris Dunn is right and that that it was machined? Yeah, it is possible. It is or are we talking about electrically powered machines? They could have had something that was human powered. They could have had techniques or tools that would get very close to that precision. Maybe it would take a lot longer. You're not dealing with 3 or 4,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 RPM, but there are still techniques and tools that can be used. I'm just saying it's possible.
Right. I follow you for that argument. I completely.
Hey, well,
I can't cater to that because I can't cater to really. I'm just not.
Well, again, I'm also the guy asking questions. I'm the interviewer. You're the actual engineer. You build the stuff. I'm the one asking you how this stuff is built. So
I worked in a machine shop in high school and stuff, and so I have a pretty good idea of tolerances and work with.
Doug is saying water powered. That makes a little bit more sense. It's like
you could do a water powered sort of machine to spin some stuff and grind and all, but still you need absolutely straight bed for the tooling to go on, and so you have to make an absolutely straight bed for the tooling to go on, and that's one thing that Chris is always saying. Okay, you need to have the straight bed ahead of time that's absolutely precise, and we're talking precision to the point of where just the heat from tooling would change enough tolerances that we start getting variances in the tooling itself, and that's absent. It's the precision is granite. It's granite, and it's huge, and the tops and the walls are parallel. The top fits absolutely perfectly where it's absolute perfect right angle, so they're absolutely parallel sides in something that 10 people could easily fit in, and it's a single block, and it was done underground that way. It's like, wow, that's
as long as we're not talking that they willed the rock to shape itself.
No willing of the rock. No, it's just, you can do it with the right equipment.
Well, it's like with anything else. If you got the right tool for the job, but even like I think back to my uncle, may he rest in peace. he was a master woodworker, and the stuff that he could do with a hammer, chisel, and a planer. I wouldn't understand how he did it. You'll be able to join two pieces of wood together so that they would appear to be one piece without any noticeable joining in between. My dad would talk about stuff like that his brother could do when we were working on stuff, and he's like, "Oh man, like if like my brother would hear, he'd be able to fix this up, and you wouldn't even notice that it was two pieces of wood." I'm thinking like, how the hell, would he be able to do that? But he'd been also doing it for 50 years. What I didn't know what tools would be available, whether it be hand tools or whether it be powered tools. So like I look at things like that. I look at the basics of what could be available, and I don't necessarily think about, okay, well, what would they have had? And also, we're talking about thousands of years ago. Like some of the tools we haven't found. Is it under sand? Is it buried somewhere else in a tomb somewhere? Was it taken out to another site and lost? Was it only certain people that had access to these things? Like, these are all questions. We don't, like, we think we know, but we don't know. Like,
Right.
we can have ideas about it, but at the end of the day, whether it's us, whether it's archaeologists, we're making the best guesses based on the information that we have available to us, that we can see in front of our eyes, or the things that we found. But you even factor in, and I brought this point up, 2 weeks ago when I was talking with Denver. The we look at the fossil and I'm obviously trying to equate fossils with tools is two different things, but we don't even have like a full picture of the fossil record, because the fossilization of bones requires a very specific environment. So,
Right.
for metal, yeah, that's going to last for a very long time, unless it's something that can rust, and then if it's going to rust, it's going to oxidize, and will it go back to dust, or what have you? If it's steel, it could be around. If it's bronze, that kind of thing. If they're only finding certain tools, are more advanced tools buried even deeper? Is it underneath the sand? The Sphinx had been buried up to its neck a few times. So, and that was over just a couple hundred years. If they didn't
Right.
spontaneous, or if they didn't continuously maintain the Sphinx, the desert would retake it. So, that's the thing. At least I want to be able to pose to anybody else out there.
I'd be interested to see what the tools they use, but obviously they haven't shown up. There's no tools that showed up that they.
There was one video. I forget. I honestly do not remember the channel it was on, but there were trying to recreate some of the crafts, like crafting techniques for the bowls, or some of the pottery, and how they were shaping stone. Whether it was like using foot pedaled drilling machines or buffing machines, and they were able to get some pretty interesting results out of that. But I also like think back to this one video, and again, my memory escapes me when it comes to half the time, when it comes to half of the YouTube video channel names out there, because it's like some random name with like 777 next to it, and somebody's trying to make like a hand drill, and they'll make three different hand drills, and some will be more effective than others. Some will be like, okay, there's too much friction, that style wouldn't work. This one would produce more akin to like a power drill, but it would take much longer. Like, how, if you were to, and just spitballing here, like if you were to look at uh, the techniques that were potentially used, if you only had hand tools available to you, and you said, okay, well, it's got to be as close to perfect as possible, how would you go about doing that?
I have no idea. Just I don't know how you even get. I mean, you could, but just hand tools. You'd have to make some sort of diamond cutting blades out of something. If you're looking at exactly what the materials they had for, let's say, 4,500 BC, whenever they say the pyramid was built and stuff.
Now, if we're talking about like powered, whether it's you know it, whether it's more advanced, water powered as Doug had mentioned, or if we're using like some type of hand powered that could produce a very high RPM, like how do you think they'd be able to produce a diamond tipped tool at that point? I'm actually like honestly asking because I don't even know how we would do it nowadays. It's not my expertise. So when they say, "Oh, it's a diamond tip saw," how do they make the diamond tip saw?
If they were just using straight what the basic history says, they'd use copper. They could use like a copper and they just embed diamond grit, rough diamonds into the surface of the blade, and then they could, if they just want to be cutting, then they just use that as a cut. That'd be one way to do it. That's a simple assembly. Or you could, or like you did like core, they do core drills. You could, use diamonds instead of.
Well, if you're doing a core drill and you had diamonds, like diamonds aren't affected by heat up until like you gotta have to like real hot to be able to affect a diamond. So like would they be able to actually like include that within the smelting process for the copper?
I have no idea.
Oh.
It might be able to. That'd be slick. I mean, it'd be a nice tool. It would cut through stuff. But I guess there was no actual signs of diamonds there. But there's diamonds in Africa. I can't discount any of that. And there's obviously copper. There's copper's on the record there, and yeah, copper tools. It was before the Bronze Age, so
I'm thinking back to this like one like talking about you know creating very weird cutting utensils. There's this one Japanese YouTube channel, and I don't know the name of it for the life of me. But the guy will make knives out of anything. It's like, oh, I'm gonna make a chocolate knife, and he'll somehow use chocolate to develop a blade, and he'll sharpen it, and he'll show how it cuts, and it's very it's cool because he's done stuff with like bismuth and what have you. And I'm just talking just to be able to show you how long of a day I've had, like talking about like, oh, like diamond encrusted, boring copper tools. I'm like, I'm kind of hungry now because I'm thinking about the knives. Like, oh my goodness, I need a snack. So if this type of construction would have been done either through powered or hand tools, like again, like we're talking semantics at this point. For the type of chamber that we're dealing with here, on a large scale, how long do you think it would take for somebody to be able to bore this, like to be able to bore this out, even if you got a couple thousand people? Like, is this something that you think would have been done over like a short amount of time? Or are we talking like centuries? Are we talking progressively improved upon? Like in terms of like for all the time you spent building models, how do you think that they would have gone about doing this in stages through generations?
if you're just talking about like the bull boxes themselves, I'm not sure which artifacts you're
Well, I was actually talking about the subterranean chamber.
Oh, I don't know how they did it. It'd take forever, and I don't know how the heck they managed to bore down at a 26-degree angle just for the descending passage for 330 feet, and it's laser straight. How do you do a 3-foot shaft? It's the angle's the problem. See, if you get like a 26-degree angle, and to hold it and like chip down forward at a specific angle, not waver at all. I don't know how you do it. It'd be awful. They're saying they're just people with like chipping rocks, and this is really silly stuff. And then you wouldn't have any air and be dusty, and the guys pounding in front of them going at it. See, the thing is, if you're doing vertical shafts or horizontal shafts, that's completely different. You can do that. You've got gravity and gravity and water and stuff. So you could level, and you can bore straight down. You just hang it. You can't, but 26-degree angle, you don't hang something. You have to, have something that kind of goes at that angle, and then you've got gravity, you got like it dangling and flex, and it's laser straight. It's within what's it, a hundredth of an inch over or a tenth of an inch over 100-foot stretch. That's a descending passage. It's laser straight.
I don't know, that like a very large protractor, I'm guessing.
You still have to. You got this angle. You got to keep going down, and like you got to get the stuff out past this. I mean, all I ever hear about people that walk down that 300-foot. It's like, it's a football field. Down that at this 3-foot square. They hate just going down there, walking down it, walk down backwards and stuff. Jeez, I'm not here yet. These guys are like chipping stuff and bagging up this little bit of dust they're chipping out, and there's no air because you got no airflow and no lights because you don't really have electric lights and stuff.
And if you're sitting out at the top, you fall. You're going all the way down to the bottom. It's like there's nothing to stop you.
Yeah, so I don't know how they did it. I couldn't do it. I don't know.
Now, like
it almost impossible task.
now, like, do you think the whole like we don't know idea of like being able to say like, oh, I don't know how this was done, and we're trying to be able to figure things out, and we will a lot of the time, and like I mentioned before, impose our own perspectives and experiences onto certain solutions. And it's great to have that kind of perspective and knowledge, because like we've got a few thousand years of collective knowledge that we can pull from to try and solve those problems. But do you think, like, with the way information's being presented nowadays and the ease it is to be able to reject certain ideas because of our faster society, do you think like that's more of an obstacle in terms of trying to discover how a lot of these things were made?
I don't know if how all this stuff is made is even matters, to be honest. I want to see what the function is.
Spoken like a true engineer.
This is data collection. We're doing data collection. It's not about
it's good to get the philosophical
how they chip through rocks and stuff. Whatever, different ways.
It's good to get a. It's good.
It's a machine. It's proven. I mean, it's replicable. All you do, take Giza, replicate it on any scale. The subterranean section, and it will work. So anybody, and I've always offered that to anybody, just follow what's there. It will work. I'm not giving you any secret knowledge or stuff. It's all out there. I show the valves and stuff like.
Well, if I don't ask the philosophical questions, there's some people in the audience who are like Chris is back and he's not asking some way out of left field question of the engineer who's just like, I just build the cool stuff, man. Like.
I want to test the machine and see what these really smart, high-tech people, what they were doing. Why did they put a perfect vortice in there? Why? They absolutely made it. And that's a prime. Yeah, just absolutely critical. It's critical, and it's like the most beautiful tornado vortice. It's that clean. It's perfect. And it's Fibonacci's 3D Fibonacci spiral vortex.
Yep, I do recall that was kind of one of the big things where it's like the golden ratio fits in the chamber.
Yeah.
So
I want to start putting ink through it and see what this vortice does, because in nature it does seem to amplify things pretty aggressively. Look at the tornado. What was it? They recorded 320 mile an hour, the highest wind speed ever, going into the tornado of a couple of them down in Oklahoma. That's higher than Antarctic wind speeds. That's higher than any wind speeds ever recorded. And they recorded it. It's like, so vortices are, I want to see what vortices do and what sort of amplifications they do and apply it for real stuff, like maybe spinning a generator or something real. I'm not into like so much the, how they chip the rock out and breathe and how's their light. It's like, I don't really care. I want to do cool stuff. I want a vortice to spin like a Pelton wheel or something at extreme speeds and amplify it so I can put a generator on the end and sell it back to the grid or just powerhouse or something. It's very high tech and that's what I want to see. That's my jam.
Now let's like I know we're getting.
I guess a question. What is it?
I've got a question.
There,
Okay.
step in here finally.
I've been.
I don't know. He did mostly inside of the model.
I've had to sit and look at this model, and
He's got model on the brain.
And
go for it.
I've had to sit and I've watched John's research and I know more about this room than I care to ever know about, really. And I've done a lot of watching of videos that people have been very generous on providing us with, so that the model can become more accurate because there isn't an awful lot of pictures, there isn't an awful lot of information about this room that's out there that we were able to glean from. So as GoPros have come in and people are able to take pictures and videos of the subterranean chamber that we can actually look at and learn more about this subterranean chamber. It's helped make it possible for modifying and making the actual model more accurate than it has been from 1999. I mean, the first model was a little bit rough, and I've been along for the journey, and it's been a very interesting journey. But I've also learned a lot about this room and about the shafts and everything else, which that's just John's work. It's not mine, but I enjoy the journey with him. But you've asked how a lot. How could he do this? How could he do that? The biggest question is why? Why would they carve this channel at 26 degrees angle perfectly down there?
That's a good point.
Why would they carve all this room at these perfectly smooth, within thousandths of an inch of being perfectly straight? All the questions were how doesn't really matter. It's why would they do all this work, all of this? I mean, anybody can. I mean, we look at the automotive industry. Our industry is not very accurate. I mean, you look at what people build in the United States. It's people don't build things that are precisely accurate. Unless it has to be like computers or something like that, and they're precision accurate. And you go, why? Why build this room so perfect when it's going to be a machine? The walls, the shafts, everything are. I mean, Chris has done a lot of research on it. And he's done this amazing research and the information that's come back to us. And he keeps saying, God, everything is so. I mean, the right angles and this and this and this are all, really close to being perfectly accurate. Why?
Because if probably the reason I hadn't asked that as much is because if they didn't do it to that level of precision or didn't do it at those angles, it wouldn't work. And then you wouldn't have the pulse generation coming from that chamber towards the upper part of the pyramid. That would be the only reason why they would have done it. Because the calculations would have been, to at least logically to me, it would just be based around the fact that if they didn't do it that way, it's not going to work to the same effect. You're not going to get the same, like the same pressure. You're not going to get the same resonance. You're not going to get the same, the same volume. Now, why they would need it at that, that's a very good question. That's well beyond my expertise.
It's well beyond my expertise, and this room has literally driven me crazy just thinking about all the little idiosyncrasies that are in this room, from the little blocks that are going down the channels to the angle of this, the little carving out of that, which I've had to work with John as far as replicating with the tools that we have available. And you just go, Jesus, why does this have to be here? Why? What was their mindset? And you can make things not perfectly accurate, and they do work, but they work very hard at making it so accurate that it's stupefying to me.
Well, then I would say at least, excuse me, on that note, because we are coming up to the end of 2 hours. I'm like,
Right.
We're going to do a part 2 sometime in the late spring where we get to interview you, and then we can actually talk about the why. I think that would be a cool follow-up.
Yeah, because it's like the Laguna brothers. It's the Cadman brothers. I'm telling you, the Laguna brothers they got a lot more resources, but we're all slow. That's all I know. So when we come back in the spring for part 2, we're gonna have this running. It's almost ready, and
I can't wait to see that. That's another reason why, because I actually want to be able to see that. I want to show people it working and be able to show off the work, because I know it's a point of pride for any engineer to show their machine functioning the way that it should be. And I know the fact you've been working very hard on the ink injection, and I think it'd be cool to be able to actually see that firsthand live on the Den of Lore.
I'm excited about seeing it run. This is the first time I've seen it actually pulse with ink in it. I've never seen it, and I want to see what it's doing, and I'm exciid about it.
Well, then
I know where all the ink goes and all that stuff. It's really cool. But part 2 we'll have like actual different color inks. You'll be able to inject at different places, and and you'll see all the three. It's a 3-dimensional water flow too. It's absolutely brilliant. So part 2, we'll have this running, ink running, and my head's back in the screen.
And then I can ask more why questions.
Yes,
Again,
you can ask lots of why questions. And
I've been out of the game for a couple years, guys. I'm getting back into the mode. So it's not that I'm expecting softball guests on. I invited my people that I consider my friends and I care about back on, because it's like I know them well enough that I can't F up too badly. But at least I'm getting back into practice.
Oh, we're friendly. We're friendly, and we're not from Coos Bay.
Oof. There goes my monetization for this video.
I just threw up a little bit here.
It's like us saying, like, damn Cornwallers. I've got friends from Cornwall. It's a great town. So, ladies and gents, it's midnight on the East Coast, and what time is it there? 9 p.m.
It's
9 p.m. on the West Coast. This has been another episode of Den of Lore. I will have the new announcement for. Actually, I can tell you what everyone. Who do we have? Sorry, I've been in like recovering and in bed the last week. As you can tell, my voice has been gone, so I'm glad it has been up to the task tonight for the most part. Next week. Let's say it's the 10th. My goodness, it even has the 10th here. Oh, actually, we've got Rocky Stucci on next week, and we're going to be talking paranormal and podcasting. That is going to be a good episode. And I know that we also do have the week after that, which that will be the 16th is Rocky. And the week after that is William Pullen. We're going to be talking UFOs and the current going-ons within the ufology community. Not for any other reason than it's just bloody entertaining. And he always has the best stories to tell. So I know William's been out in the audience.
There we go.
So, same bad.
Time.
Well, exactly. And it's like this is the whole purpose of this show now is it's not being so deep down the rabbit hole. It's just talking to interesting people to learn some cool shit, as the tagline is, and to have a good time, and to be as just supportive as a community as possible. So, ladies and gents, thank you very much for joining us. We will catch you all next week. Get some rest. Have a blast. Have a good weekend. And I'm trying to bring up the end stream. And good night.
Shaka Ra.
And now we're offline.